The pen landed on the table with a sharp click. "Sign it today," Daniel said flatly, his voice colder than the autumn wind sneaking through the half-open kitchen window. "I don't have time for drama." Amara stared at the crisp white papers in front of her. The black ink of her name stared back like a stranger. Her hands trembled, but she pressed them against her lap, forcing stillness. She had faced storms before. She had held their life together with quiet strength. But this felt like the ground shifting beneath her feet. Daniel adjusted his sharp navy suit, checking his watch as if the end of their marriage was just another appointment. He didn't even sit down. He stood over her, detached, like a lawyer waiting for a client to comply. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking at the edges. "What is this rush? We haven't even—" "Amara," he interrupted, eyes hard. "We've discussed this. The marriage is over. This is just paperwork." Her eyes flicked upward to meet his. The man standing before her was the same one she once waited for outside the library with hot coffee. The same one she'd kissed good luck before every exam. But now there was nothing soft in him, only distance. A faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to his collar. Lipstick, barely smudged, marked the edge of his white shirt. She had noticed it before. She had chosen to ignore it. Not anymore. She swallowed hard. "There's someone else," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "There's someone," he said, almost bored. "Someone who respects my time. Someone who doesn't cling to the past." Her chest tightened. Cling to the past? She had sacrificed everything for his future. "Daniel, we built this together," she pleaded. "Do you remember those nights? That tiny apartment with the leaky sink? I worked double shifts at the diner just so you could finish law school without debt. I believed in you when no one else did." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "And I'm grateful," he replied curtly. "But gratitude isn't love, Amara. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Her throat burned. She tried to keep her voice steady. "We could try counseling. We could talk. Don't throw everything away like it meant nothing." He exhaled sharply, like she was a child refusing to accept bedtime. "I'm not doing this." He stepped closer, placing his finger on the dotted line. "You sign, we move on." The kitchen around them was too quiet. The clock ticked louder than ever. Amara's gaze drifted to the old photo on the wall, Daniel holding his first law degree, her arms wrapped around him, both of them laughing. Back then, they had shared dreams, not silence. She blinked away tears and forced herself to speak. "When did you stop loving me?" He didn't answer. His silence was sharper than any confession. Her heart clenched. She had seen the signs. The late-night calls he answered in the hallway. The way he pulled away when she tried to hug him. The sudden business trips. She had convinced herself it was stress. She had convinced herself he'd come back. Now she realized he'd already left. "You're cruel," she whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed flat. "I'm realistic." She looked down at the pen he had placed beside the papers. It felt like a weapon disguised as plastic. Signing would mean erasing 20 years with a single stroke. Refusing would mean war. Her fingers hovered above it, but froze. "You've changed," she said softly. "No," he corrected. "I've grown." "You stayed the same." Her chest ached at the arrogance in his tone. The man she once loved now stood in front of her like a stranger ready to discard her. But beneath the pain, something inside her hardened. Not anger yet, but the quiet seed of resolve. Daniel checked his phone. "I have a meeting." "Don't drag this out, Daniel," she called as he turned toward the door. Her voice was small, almost childlike. "Who is she?" He paused. A smirk touched the corner of his lips. "You'll see soon enough," he said casually. Then, as if tossing away the last shred of decency, he added, "I'll bring her to court, too." Might as well make it official. The words hit like a slap. Her hands gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Her. He left without looking back. the sound of the door closing echoing through the empty house. Amara sat frozen, the divorce papers before her, the pen beside them like a silent ultimatum. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, something shattered quietly in her chest. The rain soaked through her coat, but Amara didn't move. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she crouched behind a row of parked cars, eyes fixed across the street. Under the golden glow of a streetlight, Daniel stood, laughing. The kind of carefree, boyish laugh she hadn't heard in years. Beside him, leaning into his arm as if she already owned him, was a woman. Younger, glamorous, effortlessly confident. Chloe. Her silk dress shimmered under the drizzle, hair perfectly styled despite the weather. Daniel held an umbrella over her, tilting it just enough to shield her, not himself. She looked at him like he was a prize, and he basked in it. Amara's breath hitched. She pressed a hand against her chest, steadying herself as the two of them moved closer beneath the streetlight. Chloe placed her hand on Daniel's chest, laughing at something he whispered. Then, without hesitation, she kissed him. Right there, in public. Her stomach turned. All the late-night calls, the sudden meetings, the cold detachment, it was her. It had always been her. They walked toward a nearby restaurant where two couples were waiting outside. Mutual acquaintances from Daniel's work. Amara recognized them instantly. Polished, powerful, always watching. As Daniel approached with Chloe on his arm, one of the women raised her eyebrows. "Well, this is new," she said with a tight smile. Chloe leaned in and replied loudly enough for Amara to hear. "Oh, that's his old life," tilting her head dramatically toward the distance. Laughter followed. Amara's nails dug into her palms. Old life. As if she were nothing more than a discarded chapter. She stepped back into the shadow of a building, forcing herself not to run across the street, not to scream. Her body shook, but her mind burned with clarity. She watched them enter the restaurant. Daniel holding the door for Chloe like a gentleman, a gesture he hadn't bothered with in years. Inside, through the rain-blurred glass, Amara caught glimpses of them at the table. Chloe rested her hand on his arm. Daniel leaned in close. They looked like a couple on the rise, basking in approval. She saw Chloe laugh at something, tossing her hair like she belonged in his world, and maybe she did now. This is real, Amara thought bitterly. He didn't stumble into a mistake. He built a new life, and erased me from it. Hours later, Amara sat at her kitchen table, soaked jacket draped over the chair. Her phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Lillian. "Amara, you can't just sit there," Lillian said urgently. "Get a lawyer. Make him pay. Don't let him humiliate you like this." Amara's voice was hoarse. I saw her. There was silence on the other end. Then a quiet, "Oh no." They laughed. Amara whispered. "She called me his old life." "Then you fight," Lillian snapped. "You don't let him walk over you. You built that man. Everything he has is because of you. You think that shiny little PR girl was around when he had nothing? No, you were." Amara stared at the table. Memories flooded in, her rushing between shifts, bringing him midnight coffee during study sessions, sewing buttons on his only good suit before interviews. She had been his foundation. Now Chloe was his showpiece. "She's not just a fling," Lillian continued. "Chloe Simmons runs PR for those luxury events. She's been parading him around like some trophy for months. She's connected. Influencers, sponsors, elite parties. She opened doors for him that money couldn't." Amara's stomach twisted tighter. So that was it. Chloe was his shortcut to the world he always craved. "I can't," Amara whispered. "I can't make this uglier." "This isn't about ugly," Lillian shot back. "It's about dignity." But Amara hung up, unable to hear more. Deep down, she still clung to a fragile hope. That Daniel would come to his senses. That this was a phase. That the man she once loved still existed somewhere beneath the ambition and betrayal. The next evening, Amara couldn't help herself. She parked a few cars down from Daniel's office building. At 9:15 p.m., the doors opened. Daniel stepped out with Chloe again. She wore a white trench coat this time, laughing as he held her close. They didn't notice Amara's car as they stopped under the same streetlight. Daniel's voice carried in the damp night air. "After tomorrow, she'll be out," he said, his arm around Chloe's waist. "We'll make it quick." "No drama," Chloe smirked. "I can't wait to stop pretending I'm just the PR girl." Amara's breath caught. "Tomorrow?" Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel until they ached. She watched them disappear into the night, laughter echoing down the street like a cruel soundtrack. Later, standing in her bathroom, Amara faced her reflection. Rainwater streaked down her cheeks, mingling with tears. She didn't look broken. She looked furious. Quietly, she whispered to herself, "You will not break here." The doorbell rang the next morning. She opened it to find a courier envelope on the doorstep. She tore it open with shaky hands. Inside was an official notice. "Divorce hearing scheduled. 2 days." Her eyes froze on the last line. "Under witness support, Chloe Simmons." The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a warning. The flashbulbs burst like fireworks against the gray morning sky. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, their umbrellas bobbing like dark waves as they shouted Daniel's name. At the top of the stairs, he stood like a man on display, chin raised, expensive navy suit perfectly pressed. Beside him, Chloe wore a crisp white designer suit that hugged her like a wedding gown. She held his arm, smiling at the cameras with practiced ease, as if she were already the new Mrs. Daniels. Amara paused at the bottom of the stairs, clutching her small black handbag. Her simple black dress fell neatly over her knees, elegant but understated. She had chosen it deliberately, not to impress, but to stand with quiet dignity. Still, as she looked up at the spectacle, her stomach twisted. Whispers floated down the steps. "Is that her? She looks plain. I heard she refused to sign at first. She's just bitter." Can you blame him for moving on? Some of the comments were barely masked. Some carried the sharp edge of racism. Bitter, difficult, angry. Words people loved to pin on women like her. Amara straightened her shoulders and began the long walk up the steps. With each step, the whispers grew louder. Cameras swung in her direction now, capturing the contrast between Chloe's glowing white and Amara's solemn black. Chloe noticed too. She leaned into Daniel and whispered something. He smirked. Then, just loud enough for the crowd to hear, Daniel declared, "We're starting a new chapter." Laughter rippled through the reporters. Chloe flashed a triumphant smile, as if the war had already been won before the first argument. Amara reached the entrance, heart pounding. For a brief moment, Daniel's eyes met hers. There was no remorse, only cold calculation. She felt like a chapter being closed, not a woman with history. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted from noisy spectacle to a tense, polished arena. Daniel's wealthy associates filled the back rows, their designer watches glinting under the fluorescent lights. Chloe took a seat in the front row, crossing her legs elegantly, phone tucked away, like she didn't even need to record this, because she'd already written the ending in her head. Amara sat alone at her table. Her lawyer, a steady friend from their early days, whispered, "Stay calm, no matter what he throws." She nodded faintly. Daniel's lawyer, a tall man with a voice smooth as glass, began the presentation. "Your Honor, the marriage between Daniel Thompson and Amara Thompson has irretrievably broken down. Both parties have agreed that a swift and uncomplicated settlement is best." Swift. Uncomplicated. He slid forward documents that outlined the settlement. Amara's lawyer's eyes widened as he scanned the pages. Amara leaned forward, heart in her throat. "Amara," he whispered tightly. "He's offering almost nothing. No spousal support, No share of the house. Nothing from the business. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the table. She had built that house. She had supported that business. Daniel sat across the room, relaxed, one hand draped over the arm of his chair. Chloe's eyes flicked toward Amara every few seconds, watching like a predator savoring a kill. Each time Daniel's lawyer made a point about amicable dissolution, Chloe's lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. The lawyer continued, Mr. Thompson has been the primary financial provider. Mrs. Thompson has no claim to the business, as it was established solely in his name. She has been generously allowed to retain personal belongings and a modest vehicle. Generously, as if they were giving her scraps out of kindness. Amara's chest ached. She remembered the nights when Daniel came home exhausted, collapsing on the couch, and she'd sit beside him with tax documents, contracts, unpaid bills, helping him line by line while their dinner went cold. She wasn't just a wife, she was his backbone. And now, in this sterile room, they were erasing her. Then Daniel spoke. He rose, buttoning his suit jacket like he was delivering a keynote speech. This marriage was over long ago, he said clearly. His voice carried through the room like a blade. She just didn't accept it. The words struck Amara like a slap. She clenched her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. The room fell into a hush. Some of Daniel's friends nodded approvingly. Chloe tilted her head, smiling faintly, as if he'd said something romantic. Amara's lawyer objected to several of the terms, but Daniel's team countered every point with rehearsed precision. It wasn't just legal strategy, it was performance. Every sentence, every pause, was designed to make her look like a stubborn, outdated inconvenience. As the proceedings dragged on, Amara's mind drifted briefly. She saw flashes of their shared life. The tiny apartment with peeling paint. The way Daniel used to hold her after long shifts. The day he told her, "When I make it, we'll make it together." She had believed him. Now she sat in a courtroom while he stripped her life down to nothing. The clerk's voice interrupted her thoughts. All rise. The room went silent. The doors at the back opened. A tall black woman in judicial robes entered, moving with a presence that filled the space. Judge Henrietta Cole. Her gaze was sharp, commanding. She took her seat slowly, scanning the courtroom like she could see through every layer of pretense. Her eyes landed on Amara first. A brief pause. Then they shifted to Daniel, and then to Chloe, sitting smugly in the front row. Something in her gaze changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. The temperature in the room shifted. Amara sat a little straighter. Breath caught in her chest. Something had shifted, and none of them saw it coming. The gavel came down with a crisp thud. Judge Henrietta Cole leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes scanning the room like a surgeon examining an open wound. Her voice was calm but sharp, slicing through the lingering whispers. "This is not a spectacle," she said evenly. "This is a court of law." Every murmur died instantly. Reporters in the back lowered their phones. Chloe uncrossed and recrossed her legs nervously. Even Daniel shifted slightly in his seat, though he quickly masked it with a confident half-smile. Judge Cole's gaze flicked down at the file in front of her. "I've reviewed the initial filings," she continued, "and I have questions, many questions, about the settlement being proposed here." She lifted the papers between two fingers, as though holding something foul. "This agreement suggests Mrs. Thompson is entitled to nearly nothing." Daniel's lawyer rose smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. The business was founded and operated solely by Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson was not—" "Thank you," Judge Cole interrupted, not looking at him. "I can read." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the courtroom. Chloe's posture stiffened. Judge Cole's attention shifted subtly to the front row, where Chloe sat beside Daniel like an unofficial co-counsel. "And who," she asked with razor politeness, "is the young lady seated beside the petitioner?" Chloe blinked. I'm— Daniel jumped in too quickly. She's a close friend. Judge Cole raised an eyebrow. A close friend seated in the front row of a divorce hearing. Interesting. She let the silence hang for a heartbeat longer than was comfortable, then returned to her paperwork. This is, after all, not a spectacle. Chloe's confident smile faltered. Daniel's jaw tightened. Amara sat at her table, hands folded tightly in her lap. She wasn't used to someone else standing between her and Daniel's arrogance. For the first time since the papers hit the table, a faint flicker of something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Hope. Her lawyer, Jamal, rose. His voice was calm but had an edge that Amara hadn't heard in years. Your Honor, before we move to approve the settlement, we'd like to address several discrepancies in Mr. Thompson's financial disclosures. Judge Cole gestured for him to proceed. Jamal moved to the evidence screen. Mr. Thompson's filings claim his business assets are worth approximately $200,000. However, recent bank statements show large unexplained transfers to personal accounts, luxury purchases, and offshore holdings. Additionally, the deed for their shared residence has irregular modifications filed just weeks before this hearing. Judge Cole tilted her head. Mr. Thompson, did you consult your counsel before moving these assets? Daniel's lawyer jumped up again. Your Honor, these were merely standard business transactions. I asked Mr. Thompson, Judge Cole said, her tone suddenly like steel. Daniel stood slowly. These were business matters. My wife had nothing to do with the company, so I didn't think— That's clear, Judge Cole interrupted. You didn't think? The courtroom went silent. Chloe shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Then Judge Cole turned toward Amara. Her tone softened just slightly. Mrs. Thompson, I'd like to hear from you directly. In your own words. No interruptions. Amara froze for a moment. She hadn't expected to be asked. Her throat was dry. But then she remembered her reflection in the mirror 2 nights ago. The promise she had made to herself. You will not break here. She rose slowly. Her hands trembled at first. But as she began to speak, her voice found its rhythm. I met Daniel when he was in law school, she began quietly. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with peeling walls. I worked double shifts as a nurse's aide to keep the lights on. I packed his lunches, paid his tuition bills, and came home to help him study. When he started his business, I stayed up late organizing his receipts, signing loan papers, and working extra shifts so he could build his dream. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. I believed in him, in us, every step of the way. And somewhere along that journey, I disappeared from the story. She looked directly at Daniel then. His face was unreadable, but his eyes flickered with something, maybe discomfort. She turned back to the judge. I don't want revenge. I want fairness. I want the truth to matter. Daniel suddenly scoffed. Oh, come on. She's making herself sound like some martyr. She barely— Mr. Daniel! Judge Cole's voice snapped through the air like a whip. Daniel froze mid-sentence. You will not interrupt this woman while she speaks, she said, eyes blazing. Do you understand? For the first time, Daniel's confidence faltered. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Cole nodded toward Amara. Continue, Mrs. Thompson. Amara took a breath and sat down. She didn't need to say more. Her words hung in the air like quiet thunder. Judge Cole leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing as she flipped through Daniel's financial documents once again. Before I approve this divorce, she said slowly, turning her gaze to Daniel, I have questions about your assets. Daniel's smirk, the one that had carried him through the first half of the hearing, evaporated. His jaw clenched. Chloe glanced at him nervously, sensing the shift. Judge Cole's gavel tapped lightly. And Mr. Thompson, I suggest you answer them honestly. The air in the courtroom had changed. For the first time, Daniel looked uncomfortable. And Amara, she sat a little taller. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life with a sharp click. Rows of numbers, legal filings, and account transfers appeared in crisp detail for everyone to see. Judge Cole leaned forward slightly, her fingers steepled, eyes narrowing like a hawk locking on to prey. "Mr. Jamal," she said, her voice calm but slicing through the tension. "Show the court what you found." Amara's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie. "Yes, Your Honor. What you're seeing are the financial records of Mr. Thompson's company and personal accounts over the last 6 months." He pointed at the screen. "Notice these transactions dated exactly 3 weeks before the divorce filing, $180,000, transferred from the couple's joint account to a newly registered entity under the name Simmons PR. Consulting." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Chloe's eyes widened dramatically, as if she were watching this for the first time. Daniel's lawyer shot up. "Objection! That company is unrelated to marital assets. My client—" Judge Cole raised a hand. "Sit down." The lawyer froze mid-sentence. Jamal clicked to the next slide. "This company is registered under the name Chloe Simmons, Mr. Thompson's current partner. These funds were originally part of the couple's shared investment portfolio, yet there's no evidence of repayment or business service provided. In other words, Your Honor, this was not a legitimate business expense. This was a transfer." Daniel clenched his jaw, but Chloe put on her best performance. She lifted a hand to her chest. I didn't know about any of this. Daniel handled everything. I'm just as shocked as anyone." Judge Cole's stare shifted to her. It wasn't harsh at first, just quiet, piercing. "Miss Simmons," she said slowly, "when did you register Simmons PR Consulting?" Chloe hesitated. A few months ago." "Specifically?" She swallowed. "April." Jamal's finger tapped the screen. "The registration date says April 3rd. The transfer was April 5th, 2 days later." The courtroom reacted audibly. Small gasps, whispers, rustling. Judge Cole's tone sharpened. "Miss Simmons, are you asking this court to believe that Mr. Thompson transferred nearly $200,000 to your company without your knowledge, 2 days after it was registered under your name?" Chloe's confident facade wavered. She glanced at Daniel, silently pleading for help. He didn't look back. He was too busy glaring at the evidence like he could burn it with his eyes. Her voice cracked. I just signed what he told me to." "Ah," Judge Cole interrupted. "So you did sign." Silence fell. Chloe bit her lip. The trap had snapped shut. And in that moment, something shifted inside Amara. Watching Chloe stumble under the judge's questions brought back a memory she had buried deep. She was 25 again, sitting at the tiny kitchen table in their first apartment. Daniel had pushed a thick stack of papers toward her. "Just sign here, babe," he'd said casually, kissing her forehead. "It's business stuff. You don't need to read it." She had been tired from another double shift. Her hands smelled faintly of antiseptic and bleach. She signed without thinking. She trusted him. Back then, trust was easy. That trust had become a weapon. Back in the courtroom, Judge Cole spoke, her voice like a drumbeat. "Mr. Thompson, it appears you deliberately transferred marital assets into a company owned by your mistress, with the intent to conceal them before divorce proceedings." Daniel's lawyer stood again, flustered. "Your Honor, these were strategic investments." "Sit down," Judge Cole repeated firmly. She turned to Daniel directly. "You will answer me. Did you instruct Miss Simmons to create this company for the purpose of holding your shared assets?" Daniel forced a laugh. "No, it was just creative planning. Everyone does it. This is being blown out of proportion." Judge Cole didn't laugh. Her voice dropped lower. "You're standing in my courtroom, Mr. Thompson, not a board meeting." The silence that followed was heavy. Amara lifted her chin for the first time since the divorce began. She wasn't trembling anymore. Her hands were steady in her lap. Chloe was unraveling, Daniel was cornered, and Judge Cole was watching everything like a predator circling its prey. Judge Cole tapped her pen once against the file. "Mr. Jamal," she said, "I want full documentation of every transfer involving Simmons PR and Mr. Thompson's accounts." If these transactions are proven to be marital assets siphoned off prior to the divorce filing, she turned her gaze to Daniel. Her eyes were sharp, almost gleaming. It won't be her leaving empty-handed. It'll be you. Gasps broke through the courtroom like a wave. Daniel's face drained of color. Chloe shifted back in her seat, no longer performing innocence. And Amara, she exhaled slowly, for the first time in months, feeling something warm rise inside her. Not triumph yet, but justice stirring, like the first rumble of a storm. The courtroom buzzed like a hive of unsettled bees as the session resumed. Chloe leaned toward Daniel, her voice low but fierce, eyes burning with panic. "You said this was handled," she hissed through clenched teeth. "You said she'd sign quietly." Daniel kept his eyes fixed on the judge's bench, jaw tight. "Keep your mouth shut and let me talk," he muttered. But his usual control, the smug arrogance that had defined every interaction so far, was cracking at the edges. Chloe's perfectly glossed lips trembled. Her once flawless poise, the glamorous aura she carried into every room, was beginning to rot under the courtroom lights. Judge Cole's voice sliced through the whispering. "Miss Simmons, please approach the stand." Chloe froze. "Me?" "Yes, you," Judge Cole replied coolly. "Since you seem to have played a significant role in these financial transactions, I'd like to hear your testimony." Chloe stood reluctantly, her designer heels clicking sharply against the floor as she made her way to the witness stand. Reporters in the back leaned forward like vultures, sensing blood. After swearing her in, the judge nodded toward Jamal. "Proceed." Jamal approached slowly, his voice steady and patient. "Miss Simmons, you were aware of Mr. Thompson's marriage during your relationship, correct?" Chloe hesitated. "Yes." "And during this time, did Mr. Thompson ever make promises to you regarding his marital assets?" Her eyes flickered toward Daniel. His glare was unmistakable, a silent command. But the courtroom was a different battlefield. She couldn't rely on charm here. "He mentioned that things would be different once the divorce was finalized," she said cautiously. Jamal stepped closer. "Did he promise you specific assets, Miss Simmons? A house? A share of his business? Perhaps the marital home?" Chloe's carefully constructed mask wavered. He said the house would be ours, that it was only a matter of time." The room erupted in whispers. Amara didn't move. She sat quietly, her hands folded, eyes glistening, not from pain this time, but from the deep, steady surge of something she hadn't felt in years. Vindication. Judge Cole raised her hand for silence. "Miss Simmons," she said sharply, "answer clearly. Did Mr. Thompson promise you the marital home before this divorce was finalized?" Chloe swallowed hard. "Yes," gasps swept through the room. Cameras clicked furiously in the back as journalists scribbled notes. Outside the courtroom, live bloggers were already typing furiously. "Mistress admits house, promise in court." Shock testimony. Daniel shot up from his seat. "She's twisting my words. I never—" "Sit down, Mr. Thompson," Judge Cole ordered. But Daniel wasn't ready to lose control. He straightened his tie, flashing his lawyer a warning glance, then turned to the judge with his most polished grin, the one that had charmed investors and colleagues for years. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth like silk, "this entire situation is being blown out of proportion. Chloe is emotional. She misunderstood casual conversations. I respect this court and my wife, but—" Judge Cole didn't blink. "Mr. Thompson," she interrupted coldly, "your respect for this court is not measured in performances. It's measured in truth." Daniel's grin faltered. Amara watched him carefully. For years, she had seen that same smile win over everyone. Landlords, bankers, business partners. Today, it fell flat. The walls he built with lies were finally being peeled away, brick by brick. Jamal seized the moment. "Miss Simmons," he said gently, "you were under the impression that After this divorce, you would be stepping into Mrs. Thompson's life, her home, her place, her future. Is that correct? Chloe's voice was small now. Yes, that's what he told me. Judge Cole's gaze softened as she turned toward Amara. Mrs. Thompson, would you like to respond to any of this? Amara shook her head slowly. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke. No, Your Honor. I think the truth speaks for itself. It did. Chloe's confident smile had vanished entirely. Her hands fidgeted in her lap as she stepped down from the stand. She avoided Daniel's eyes. It was dawning on her. Without Amara's years of sacrifice, Daniel's empire wasn't a fortress. It was scaffolding built on someone else's labor, and it was collapsing. Outside the courtroom, the story had exploded. Reporters gathered like storm clouds. Headlines formed in real time on screens. Wife betrayed, mistress exposed, courtroom drama unfolds. Amara caught snippets as the doors opened for recess. She supported him through law school. He gave their house away. Did you see the judge's face? Inside, Judge Cole cleared her throat. Given the revelations today, I will adjourn until tomorrow. Final verdict will be delivered then. She leaned forward, locking eyes with Daniel. Her voice was low, deliberate. Tomorrow. We settle this. The gavel came down with a decisive thud. Daniel sat frozen, his face pale for the first time. Chloe sank beside him, no longer the glamorous trophy. She looked terrified. And Amara? She stood as the courtroom emptied, shoulders back, chin lifted. The power had shifted, not through revenge, but through truth, finally surfacing, undeniable, unstoppable. Thunder cracked overhead as Amara approached the courthouse the next morning. Storm clouds swirled like dark ink across the sky, mirroring the weight of everything about to unfold. Rain splattered against the steps, and reporters huddled beneath umbrellas, their microphones aimed like spears toward the doors. She moved through the chaos slowly, deliberately. Her black trench coat clung to her shoulders, and her face was calm, eerily calm. Inside, however, her heart drummed steadily like distant war drums. Daniel arrived moments later. His usually immaculate suit was damp at the edges, his hair slicked back in a way that felt more desperate than stylish. Sweat beaded at his temple despite the chill. Chloe trailed behind him, clutching her bag nervously, her glamorous confidence reduced to jittery glances. The courtroom was packed. The storm outside only amplified the tension inside. Every cough, every shuffle of papers, echoed like a cannon shot. Judge Cole entered promptly at 9. She didn't waste time. Her presence was thunder in human form. She began slowly, her voice low and steady. This court has heard testimonies, reviewed documents, and observed conduct. And what I've seen is not merely a broken marriage. It's a case of betrayal, manipulation, and calculated deceit. Her gaze locked onto Daniel. Mr. Thompson, you stood here expecting this court to rubber-stamp your cruelty. You thought legal papers would shield dishonesty. But the law is not a weapon for cowards. A wave of murmurs rolled through the gallery. Daniel tried to maintain his smirk, but it flickered like a candle in the wind. Judge Cole continued, "This marriage was built on the labor and sacrifice of Mrs. Thompson. She supported you financially, emotionally, and structurally. You rewarded that loyalty with lies, infidelity, and financial fraud. And worse, you attempted to humiliate her publicly while stripping her of everything she earned." Her tone sharpened. "This court does not exist to reward betrayal, nor to turn a blind eye to the subtle racism and elitism that dripped through your conduct and the whispers surrounding this case. Mrs. Thompson was not an accessory to your success. She was the foundation." Daniel's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Chloe stared at the floor. Judge Cole lifted a document from her bench. "Regarding the prenuptial agreement, this court finds that it was signed under fraudulent circumstances. Mrs. Thompson was not fully informed, nor was she represented fairly at the time. Therefore, the prenuptial agreement is hereby declared invalid. Gasps erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Judge Cole's voice rose like thunder. "Mr. Thompson, you are hereby ordered to surrender 50% of all current assets, including business holdings, investments, and property, to Mrs. Thompson. In addition, you will pay back pay for the years of unpaid contributions she made to the business, plus restitution for the unlawful transfer of funds to Simmons PR." Daniel shot up. "This is insane. You can't just sit down." Judge Cole's voice boomed, slamming down the gavel. "You played with a good woman's dignity. Now the law plays with yours." He sank back down, pale as the storm outside flashed lightning against the windows. Judge Cole turned toward Chloe. "Miss Simmons, based on your own testimony, you participated, willingly or not, in the illegal transfer of marital assets. This matter will be referred to the district attorney for further investigation. I suggest you find competent legal counsel." Chloe's jaw dropped. "What?" "No," Daniel told me. But the judge had already moved on. Her focus returned to Amara. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her tone softening, "you have shown remarkable grace under fire. This court commends your strength. The law recognizes your contribution, your dignity, and your rightful share. This judgment stands effective immediately." The gavel came down with a final echoing crack. For a moment, everything was still. The storm outside roared, rain pelting the windows like applause. Amara closed her eyes briefly, letting the sound wash over her. She didn't smile, not yet. This wasn't a celebration. It was justice. Daniel leaned toward Chloe, his voice a harsh whisper, audible only because of the sudden silence. "You set me up," Chloe's face twisted in panic. "You promised me everything." Reporters caught the moment instantly. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions. Security moved in as chaos erupted. Chloe shouting, Daniel trying to push past reporters, his lawyer scrambling to calm the scene. And in the center of it all, Amara stood still, her posture tall, her expression steady as the storm swirled around her. The verdict had landed like a lightning strike, and everything Daniel built on lies was burning. The courtroom emptied slowly, like the echo of a storm finally drifting away. The air was thick with the aftermath, reporters buzzing like bees, camera flashes popping in every direction, and whispered judgments swirling through the corridors. Amara stepped out first. Her posture was regal, chin lifted, coat draped neatly over her shoulders. She didn't rush. Every step was measured. A quiet declaration that she no longer had to run or hide. The moment she reached the courthouse steps, the reporters closed in like a wave. "Amara, how does it feel to win? What do you want to say to Daniel? Will you press charges against Chloe?" She paused, letting the flashbulbs flicker across her composed face. For years, she'd lived in Daniel's shadow, unseen, unheard. But now, the world wanted her story. Her lawyer gently motioned for space, and Amara simply said, voice steady, "The truth speaks for itself." She didn't mock. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her dignity was louder than any victory speech. Behind her, Chloe stumbled out of the courthouse, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her designer heels clicked frantically as she pushed through the reporters. Moments ago, she was the woman who smirked in court, dripping with arrogance. Now she was just another headline. Daniel followed minutes later, flanked by his lawyer. His once unshakable charisma had evaporated. Shoulders hunched, face ashen, eyes darting nervously at the crowd, he looked like a man who had lost not just wealth, but control. Reporters swarmed him with harsh questions. He said nothing. For the first time, silence was his only defense. Inside the courthouse doorway, Judge Cole lingered. Amara turned briefly, catching her eye. No words were exchanged. Just a nod, firm, knowing. It was the kind of silent exchange that only two strong black women could share. Recognition of struggle, resilience, and victory earned through fire. Outside, social media was already ablaze. Courtroom showdown, wife outsmarts. Husband and mistress in explosive trial. Judge shuts down fraudulent prenup. Internet cheers. Clips of the verdict circulated online, paired with reaction videos, commentary, and think pieces about power, race, and justice. Amara's composed walk down the courthouse steps became a viral image, a symbol of quiet strength. Later that week, Amara stood in a small but beautiful apartment overlooking the city. Sunlight poured through wide windows, illuminating boxes stacked neatly against the walls. Her old home, the one Daniel had tried to steal, was tied up in legal transfers now. But she didn't feel loss. She felt freedom. She set a cup of tea on the counter and looked at a folder labeled Amara's Consulting Firm. Launch Plan. For years, she had built Daniel's empire silently. Now, she would build her own, on her terms. She thought back to the timid woman who once signed documents she didn't understand, who kept quiet at dinner parties while Daniel bragged, who looked away whenever Chloe's name was whispered. That woman no longer existed. Her phone buzzed with a text from an old friend. "You did it. You really did it." Amara smiled softly. She didn't feel the need to reply with anything grand. The victory wasn't in proving anyone wrong, it was in finally choosing herself. The world had moved on to its next scandal. But for Amara, this was the true beginning. Healing wouldn't happen overnight. Trust wouldn't magically restore itself, but she had reclaimed something more valuable than assets or headlines: her dignity. As she gazed out at the setting sun, her voice echoed softly in narration. Dignity may be quiet, but it is powerful. It doesn't need revenge to make a statement. It simply stands tall, long after the noise has faded.